Right, good afternoon, team. Just want to make sure that we introduce the team that we have here. We have two members of our legal team with Juan Cruz and Associates. One will be Ms. Lisa Pong, who will begin the presentation. Then we also have Sonia Garcia, who will follow up. And again, this is on our Title IX mandatory training that we have for anyone who leads with bullying, harassment, discrimination, workplace discrimination. We just want to make sure that we are in compliance. And if there's ever any support that you need, this training will guide you in every step of the way. And of course, if we have to resort back to calling our legal team, they'll be available. So I'm gonna turn it over to Ms. Lisa Paul. Ms. Paul?
Thank you. Is it on? Yeah. Can everybody hear me? Sometimes like you're up here and you see people kind of giving you funny looks, and then you find out 20 minutes into the presentation, we couldn't hear a word you were saying. So, okay, so if anybody can't hear, it's okay, because I'm a little bit hyper and I tend to move around, so I can always pull the mic out. In fact, I think I'm just going to start like that. So, yes, we are going to be talking about Title IX. Who's heard of Title IX? Well, you're just kind of halfway raising your hands. You got to raise them all the way up so I can see them. Just a few. So you've probably heard about Title IX when it comes to athletics. That's sometimes what we think about, right, when we think about Title IX. But it actually applies to sexual harassment, okay? So when we talk about Title IX, we're not going to be talking about athletics. We're going to be talking about sexual harassment and what the requirements are under Title IX. And specifically what we're going to be talking about is responding to complaints that fall under Title IX. How many principals do I have in the house? All the way up. Let's see. All the way up. Okay. Leave your hands up. Who are the APs in the house? Keep it. Everybody that's an AP or a principal, leave your hands up. So that's quite a few of you. Okay, you can put your hands down now. And how about any counselors? Okay, I got a counselor here. Okay, you guys are the front lines. When a student comes to you about an issue or something, it's usually going to stop with the principal. And all of the issues that we see at our office, the principals were involved. So what Sonia and I hope to do this afternoon is arm you with some information. So when somebody comes to you and you say, wow, how do I handle this? Do I need to handle it under my regular student code of conduct, or is this something that falls under Title IX? And that's important, and we'll talk about why it's important for you to understand what the differences are, because Title IX is essentially a grievance process. When we talk about Title IX and we talk about the federal regulations with sexual harassment, it's essentially a complaint process. It's a very rigid, a very formal complaint process under federal regulations. And so it's very, very important that the district comply with those regulations. Because if we don't comply, we can get sued. And guess what? There's no cap on the damages. Okay, so, but that's not the only reason. We don't just want you to do it because you're checking a box. We want you to do it because it's the right thing to do. And when students are able to go to school and feel safe, guess what? They're more successful. And the more successful your students are, guess what? The more successful you all are as educators, right? You want your students to be successful. You want them to pass those required exams. You want them to graduate from high school, and you want them to go on to be successful. Why? Because that brings success and distinction not only to you as their former teachers and principals, but to your district and to their community, right? So in the end, that's why we're doing this, okay? So everybody take out a piece of paper. We're going to take a little pretest. And I want you to write on it pretest. Okay, write pretest on your paper. And then what we're going to go, and hopefully if Sonia and I did our job, you're going to come back, and hopefully if you got anything wrong, you're going to know what the right answer is. And if you're still confused, well, we may need to do a second training. Sorry, you're going to have to come back. But hopefully we won't be there. Okay, so, all right, is everybody ready? Anybody need more time? Okay, just like you give your kids a pop test, I'm giving you guys a pop test today. Here we go. Okay, so pretest. What is the name of the Edgewood ISD Title IX coordinator? Who is that person? And if it's more than one person, name the other person. Who is that person? Okay. Number 2. How long does the district have to complete a Title IX investigation? Is it 30 days? Is it 90 days? Or is it 120 days? So how long does the district have to complete a Title IX investigation? I gave you a multiple choice, see? So you got a 1 in 3 chance. Okay, here we go. A third question. This is a true or false. Okay, so now you got a 50-50. Odds are going up, right? I know y'all know the answer to this. If there is an ongoing criminal investigation, the district must wait for the police to complete their investigation before starting the Title IX investigation. True or false? All right, number 4. Again, true or false? Prior to completing a Title IX investigation, the investigator must send all of the evidence submitted by the parties or the evidence that is collected by the investigator during the investigation that is directly related to the allegations. In other words, the Title IX investigator has to send all of the evidence to both parties, the person who made the complaint and the alleged respondent. True or false? Has to share all the evidence. Okay. And number 5, don't worry, there's only 6, no big deal. Okay, a party may bring their adult family friend to serve as an advisor to them and attend all meetings and interviews relating to a Title IX investigation. True or false? And the last one is really the easiest of them all, and there's no wrong answers, and that is, I know what to do if a student reports that he or she is being sexually harassed. And really, there is no wrong answer there. I want everyone to feel, I'm not going to pick these up, but I want you all to feel like, I asked you some questions you may or may not have known the answers to, and that's okay. Hopefully you'll get some information today and understand a little bit more about what your obligations are relating to an investigation. And hopefully when we get to the number 6, you're going to say, now I know, right? So that's where we're going to start. All right, everybody ready to get started and have some fun? Okay, we got to laugh a little, guys, right? We got to have some fun here. Okay, let's see if I can do this with 2 hands. Sonia always laughs at me when I have to deal with we are using a clicker. Okay, so where are we? Okay, so this is just a little caveat. Actually, the district is required under the Title IX regulations to post the training. So if you post this training, we want to tell people, like, you can't use this for commercial purposes. You can't use this and sell it and try to make money off of it. I don't think anyone would, but you never know. So anyway, we're only going to use this training for, or use these materials for our purposes. So there's a notice there. So here's what we're going to be doing this afternoon. We're going to be talking, I'm going to give you some background. I gave you a little bit already. There's actually more to come. It's actually much more interesting, a lot more to it. We're going to talk about the scope of how Title IX applies to what the district does, all of its operations and activities. And then we're going to talk about what's the definition of sexual harassment? What does that look like? How does that affect what I do at my job? I'm going to tell you what those definitions are, and we're going to give you some examples of how some allegations might come to you so you can identify it and then you know what to do. Then we're going to talk about the grievance process. Okay, now we know we've got a sexual harassment claim. Now what do we do? How do we go through that? And then we're going to talk about conducting. You all might be assigned as Title IX investigators. We're going to talk to you about what's a conflict of interest or how you might be biased and not even know it. We all have biases, right? My best friend likes to watch Fox News. And when I asked her, where did you hear that? On Fox News. Well, did you hear it on any other news source? No. Well, sometimes like news, right? We know that the media can be biased too, right? We all have biases. And then we're going to talk about issues of relevance. And then I'm going to go through some hypo. Sonia and I are going to give you some different examples, and you're going to tell us what you would do in that situation, and then we'll take our post test, and we'll see how you do there. Okay. So, you know, you guys have these beautiful little like maroon notebooks that you can pull those out now and open them up. Everybody should have one. Those are for you. You all have yours in front of you. It's got the presentation. Please use the materials. Sonia and I and other attorneys, we've done these kinds of presentations, you know, for multiple clients across multiple districts. And one thing that I always see is that, you know, we go through the presentation and we answer questions, and then 2 months later, you know, it comes up, and, you know, we find out, well, they didn't really understand, you know, what we said. So sometimes for me, I don't know for all of you, but if I am looking at something and I write something down and I get out my highlighter or I get a sticky note and I put the sticky note there, it's more likely to resonate in my brain. I have a better understanding of that. So this time I thought, you know what? I'm going to create a bunch of materials and I'm going to send it to them, and I want people to take notes, I want people to ask questions, and I want people to get their little highlighters. You all have a nice little box of highlighters there, get your sticky notes out, make notes, because I promise you, you will go back to your offices, and in January, something might happen, and you're going to say, I remember saying something, but what do I do? Now you got a handy little notebook where you can go back and you can double check your material. So please do this. Okay, so now we know what we're going to be doing. So let's talk about what is Title IX. This is it. When we talk about Title IX, this is Title IX. This is the law. And what does it say? It's 37 words. It says, no person in the United States, and that's actually important, in the United States, and we'll talk about why that is under the new regulations, but no person in the United States shall, on the basis of sex, even sex has a meaning here, we'll talk about what that means too, be excluded from participation in, be denied the benefits of, or be subjected to discrimination under any education program or activity receiving federal financial assistance. That's it. That's the law. So you said, well, what's the hoopla? I hear about it on the news, Title IX. This is the law, but then how does the law get implemented, right? All right, who remembers Betsy DeVos? Under the Trump administration, right? Former Secretary of Education, yeah. Well, under the Trump administration, Betsy DeVos, she and her team, the Department of Education, rewrote the implementing regulations of this law. And that's what we're going to be talking about. You're going to be saying, Lisa, that was back in 2020. Right. She's no longer the Secretary of Education, but those regulations that were implemented under her leadership are still in force, and the district, all school districts, all public, agencies, universities, schools, have to comply what's there. The Biden administration is rewriting these, so guess what? You get to see us again probably sometime, maybe in a year or so. We'll come back and we'll update you on what changes. So anyway, just know that that's what we're going to be talking about. This is the law, and we're going to write some of these words down, and then what we're going to be talking about are those implementing regulations, which get to those things like, how long does a district have to conduct an investigation? Can I bring someone with me, a family friend, to sit in on these meetings? Do I have to share all the evidence? That's all in the regulations. And that's what we're going to be talking about today, okay? And it's going to be really, really interesting. So I want you to get your pens ready, get those highlighters ready, and we're going to go. Okay. A lot of pictures on the screen, right? Does anybody recognize any of these pictures? Yes? No? So the history of Title IX, does anyone know when that was passed?
1674?
It was in 1972. You were close. You were close. And actually, he gets a prize for answering. So who was the president in 1972? Nixon, right? So Nixon's face is on there because he was actually the president Right here, sorry.
Raise your hand, raise your hand.
Sorry.
You got the-
Okay, there you go. I'll keep some up here. So he was the president at the time that it was signed. And think about what was going on in the 70s, okay? Remember, in the 60s, that's when we got like the Civil Rights Act, right? That's when all of that passed. And remember, whenever the Civil Rights Act passed, it actually passed whenever Kennedy was president, but it wasn't signed into law, Title VII, that is, about discrimination in the workplace, until it passed before Kennedy was assassinated, but it didn't get signed into law until Johnson was the president. So Title VII passed, and that included, it prevented employers from discriminating against women in the workplace. I mean, we've all heard stories, right? We read about Ruth Bader Ginsburg. I mean, very smart lady, graduated #1 in her, in her class in law school from Columbia, and she couldn't get a job. Why? Because she was a woman. And there are lots and lots of stories. If you ever watch period dramas, you know that it's tough. I'm watching Julia. Anybody watching Julia on Max? They talk about women and how tough it was for women in the workplace and just issues that were facing women in the 60s. Well, so women were fighting for different kinds of rights, right? Whether it was the right to not be discriminated in the workplace and to have a job and all of that. At the same time, there was this senator in the 70s, and that's who this guy is on the bottom left. Anybody know who he is? He is Senator Bai, but he spells his name kind of differently. I don't know if I might have that in my notes. But anyway, it's Senator Bai from Indiana. And Senator Bai had a wife named Marvella. And Marvella was from Oklahoma. And Marvella was a very smart little girl when she grew up, but she grew up very poor. And even though she was smart and she graduated at the top of her class in high school, and she had big dreams to go to the University of Virginia, that was her dream school, UVA. But you know what happened? They said no. Do you know why? She was a woman. She was a woman, and she could not go. So she went, where do you think she went? She went to OSU. I went any, fans, from, I think they're the Cowboys, right? But she went to OSU and did not go. And so, Senator Bai remembered that story and his wife not being able to go. And he started thinking, well, wait a minute. I mean, just if we give women, some rights in the workplace, it doesn't do them any good if they can't get into school. They can't go to the university. My dad graduated from Texas A&M University in 1963. He remembers when women were not allowed to go to school there. The only way you could go to school at Texas A&M was if your dad was a professor or you were married to a professor. Women just couldn't go there. And so, really, that's not that long ago, right? I remember the 60s. I was a kid, but still, I remember that. And so Senator Bai, was important to him, and so he introduced the Title IX legislation, and he is considered the father of Title IX. Okay, so Senator Bai is the father of Title IX. So now Title IX is signed into law by President Nixon, and so let's talk about what it is. So it began as a regulatory scheme. And it was to provide equal participation in universities. So no longer could a university say, well, you can't come to UVA because you're a woman. Okay, colleges and universities needed to open up. And so, and it was also in athletics, right? We, read stories about having equality in athletics, and every now and then we read about the story. I think it wasn't that long ago, right? The women's basketball team, remember there was like the Sweet 16, and one of the players, the female players, I took a picture of the female locker room or the female practice room. Does anybody remember that? It went like viral. And then they took a picture of what the guy athletes had, and it was like night and day. The girls had like a couple of yoga mats and a ball and, a small area, and the guys had like all these big machines. Anyway, it was just pointing out the differences, in the practice areas for these athletes. So every now and then we read about, discrimination or, treating people differently in athletics. But for purposes of this, what we're going to be focusing on is the the focus of Title IX as it is like sexual harassment. So when you think about Title IX, as we're going to talk about it this afternoon, what it is it is a grievance process. And I think it will help you if you start with, oh, this is how we resolve these kinds of complaints, because it's very technical. So think of it as a grievance process. And also it provides a mechanism for people to recover damages if they do something wrong, okay? And remember, there's no cap. There's no cap, so if a district is found to have violated it, you know, people can recover lots of money. So that's not gonna happen to any of you. It's not gonna happen to Edgewood because you guys are gonna get trained, right? Okay, so the scope. Where do you think it applies to at the school district? Remember we talked about, like, what's the scope of Title IX? Where does it apply at your school district, at your school campus? Somebody say something. Like, what do you think? Everywhere, right? Like what? Give me some examples.
Sports.
Sports, okay, yep.
Education in the classroom.
In the classroom?
Even in extracurricular activities.
Extracurricular activities? What about the UIL trip to, you know, Austin for choir contest? Yes. How about the school bus before school? Yes. How about after school? On the school grounds? School's over, it's 4 o'clock. Some teachers are working, some kids are doing tutoring. Yeah. I mean, you know, if you're letting kids hang out, that's why if you have a rule that says at 4 o'clock, everybody off campus, if you don't have a reason to be here, you teachers should be making sure of that, because that issue has come up. Like, wait a minute, they're supposed to be at home. Well, but you let kids hang out here. And then kids do what kids do. Sometimes they get into trouble and they do things they're not supposed to do, and it causes problems for you as a principal. Don't do that. If they don't have a reason to be on your campus, it's after school, make them go home. Okay, music class. Everything that you can think of. You take a trip to SeaWorld because they did well on their exams. Yeah, that's a school activity. So anything that you're going to have control of. So let's talk about what that definition is. So it covers all operations for which a school district receives financial assistance, including academics, like you said, extracurriculars, athletics, and other programs, okay? Cub Scouts, you know, that are there, you know, using your gym or your facility, all of that, okay? Anything that you do on your campus where you have control over it, it's gonna count. All right. So now we know that what kinds of activities that it applies to. What about off-campus stuff? Yeah, I just gave you an example, right? You take the kids to SeaWorld, it's going to apply there. You let them spend the night in a hotel, you know, because it's the, you know, cross-country team and they're getting ready to compete the next day, and something goes down at the hotel or on the bus the way there, on the way back, something that implicates or triggers Title IX, yeah, it's going to apply there too, okay? So it's going to cover things off campus where you have, or the district has substantial control over both the person that's accused, okay, the person who's, you know, engaging in the misconduct, and the context in which it occurred. So, for instance, the UIL trip, you have control over that, right, because it's your trip. And then you have control over the person, right, because it was the student on that trip that committed the conduct. If it happens, you know, that, well, it was an employee at the hotel that did something, well, you don't have any control over that employee. That's a different kind of problem. Still need to do something about it, but it's not going to trigger Title IX, okay? So we'll talk about that too. Okay. So this is, remember when we were talking about the regulations and Betsy DeVos? This is what the regulations look like. So this is just lifted from the regulations. And so I just gave you kind of a screenshot of it. It says general response to sexual harassment. When we say recipient, who's the recipient? The recipient is the school district, okay? That's the recipient, when they say that word or that word is used in the regulations, that means whoever's receiving the federal funds, okay? So recipient's response, so that means, in this case, Edgewood ISD. So if a recipient has actual knowledge of sexual harassment in an education program or activity against a person in the United States, you know, then you must respond promptly in a manner that is not deliberately indifferent, okay? And the reason why I highlighted in the United States, that's new under Betsy DeVos. And it comes back to, and I'll just go back real quickly, see where the regulation or the law says no person in the United States. It used to be, I've kind of been working in the area of Title IX for a long time, and probably at least since 2012, but even before then, I worked in the university setting. If the university took students abroad and they stayed in Ireland and something went down there, under the old regulations, the university would still have a duty to respond under Title IX. Under the Betsy DeVos regulations, they looked at that and they said, well, that says no person in the United States. So if they're not in the United States, no violation of Title IX. It may be a violation of something else, your student code of conduct, but it doesn't trigger Title IX. That's something new. I think that's going to change under Biden, but we'll wait and see. So right now, you take kids to Spain for a trip. They're going to march or have a choir concert or something like that in Spain, and a student on that trip sexually harasses another student on that trip. Guess what? Is it Title IX? No, it's not going to trigger Title IX. Why? Because it didn't happen to a person in the United States. Is it a violation of something else? The answer should be a resounding yes, yes. And so you must do something. But that, you have a different process for looking at that, right? You're going to look at that under your regular student code of conduct, okay? So we're going to be talking, there's lots of little distinctions like that, and I'm going to be giving you more information, but I don't know how many trips you all take overseas. Probably doesn't come up that much, but I did want to point that out to you, that it does look like that. Expect it to change, though. So I don't know. I'm just, I don't have a crystal ball, but that might happen. Okay, so going back to our definition on the basis of sex. Okay, what does that word mean? It's gotten more complicated lately, right? A little bit, right? We know it's different. We used to think of it as, male, female, but I know, it's different now, and there are students who may not identify as either, right? And so we need to be sensitive to that. And if you're not sensitive to that, and there's discrimination involved, guess what? That can trigger Title IX too. So we're going to talk about what does sex mean as it's defined or as it's stated in the law here. So let's talk about some statistics and why this is important. This actually comes from a report. Let me put my glasses on here because, I can't see it without it. But this is actually from a national climate survey from 2019. And the Biden administration has cited to this. Now, I don't know, there may be a more updated survey, but take a look at these statistics, okay? LGBTQ students, 59% of them have reported that they feel unsafe at school because of their sexual orientation. 42% are feel unsafe because of their expression, and 37.4% because of their gender. Look how many students have missed school. A third have missed at least one day in the past month. That's a lot. And then there's a good chunk that have missed 4 or more days in a month. That's a lot of statistics. And then, look at the this 98.8 heard gay used in a negative way at school. 91.8, reported that they felt distressed because of the language. So why does this matter to you? Why do you think that Sonia and I are here talking to you about these statistics? They're your students. You care about their success. That's why you're here. That's why all of you have jobs, right? You want them to be successful. If you have a large population of students who are feeling unsafe, how do they learn? How are they successful? How do they do well on these tests, which, by the way, they measure, that's how successful you are, is by how well those students are doing. So we got to do something about it. We have to pay attention. We have to pay attention. And I promise you, what Sonia and I are going to talk to you about, it's not, yes, it's hard. Yes, it's technical. I say hard, but there's a lot there. But honestly, if you listen and you do something, then you're not gonna, it's gonna improve things immensely, okay? So let's talk about that and talk about how sex and why we care about LGBTQ students. What is sex? Well, sex is, the binary classification is the two main categories, right? Male and female. So we understand that. But the Department of Education and Biden administration has issued some guidance on this, is that sex also includes sexual orientation, sexual identity, including transgender. So if you have a student who is being discriminated against because of how they identify, including their, transgender status, you have, a student who was born biologically a male, but chooses to dress like a female, and that student is being harassed because of how they, are dressing. You've got something you got to deal with, and that's may trigger you to do something under Title IX. Okay, and the Biden administration is going after schools and universities who aren't paying attention to this. So this is where you have to put on your hat, and like your detective hat, and be asking lots of questions whenever something comes to you. Because sometimes something gets presented to us, and if we don't ask the right questions, then we don't really know what's happening, right? So we just always have to take, a little bit of time, ask questions, and say, what's happening here? What's going on? Is there something I need to know about how this student identifies, or what their sexual, expression, orientation, all of that? We need to care about that. Okay. So what is sexual harassment on the basis of sex? Okay. Sexual harassment under Title IX, there's only three ways. Three big broad ways, and they're listed here for you. These are the three big, what I call the three big definitions under sexual harassment. So when someone calls me and says, Lisa, does this trigger Title IX? I always start with the first question. Does it involve an employee? Is it a quid pro quo? So an employee, you have a teacher, says, you, whatever, have sex with me, I'll give you an A. That's quid pro quo. That's sexual harassment. That's a huge no-no on so many levels, right? Not just Title IX. You guys would flip a lid, you find out about that, you guys are on it, white on rice, when that comes out. We're going to talk about sometimes it doesn't always happen that way because of bias, and so he's going to talk to you about that. But that's the first way, okay? So it happens, but more often than not, that's not most of these things don't come in as a quid pro quo. So the first one has to do with an employee, okay? So everybody understand that one, okay? We're talking about, adult and student. Adult and student, okay? The second way, that's the one where things kind of get complicated. That's the one that kind of trips everybody up. So you can put a big star by this because most things are going to fall under the second category, or that's what you're going to want to, when a kid comes in complaining about something, this is the one that you're going to think, well, it's probably going to fall under one of these. Okay. So this is how it's defined in the law and the regulations under Betsy DeVos. It says, unwelcome conduct. What does that tell you right there? I did not consent. This is not something that I want to do. So it's unwelcome, okay, by the person who's making the complaint. Unwelcome. It's unwelcome conduct determined by a reasonable person to be what? So severe, pervasive, and, look at that, circle that word, and objectively offensive, that it effectively denies a person equal access to the district's education program or activity. Wow! Severe. What is severe trigger to you? Serious, right? It's something bad. Slap on the butt. Is that severe? One slap on the butt? It might be, but I don't know. So, we'll talk about that. That's gonna come up. Yeah. Okay. Slap on the butt can be pervasive. Okay. Pervasive, how often is it happening? A lot. What's the frequency? What's the duration? And objectively offensive. It has to meet all three of those. It has to be all three. It has to be so bad that it effectively denies a person from participating in the education or activity. I'm just going to stop right here for a minute. If you guys need to get something, please feel free to get something. It's going to be about a 3-hour presentation. At about 2:30, I'm going to give you a break, though, okay? So you'll be able to jump up. If you want to stand up and move around, no problem there. If you need to do that because you're falling asleep, no problem there, okay? So it has to be severe, pervasive, and objectively offensive. It has to meet all three. And it's kind of a high bar. It really is. And we'll talk about some cases and what the courts say about that. So that's the second one, and most of them are going to come in that way. But the third one can also be triggered. So that's sexual assault, okay? And it's got a definition, it's defined actually in the federal code, but it includes all of those things that you might think of, and that's, and the next slide will talk about that. But rape, sodomy, incest, fondling and things like that, okay? Sexual assault. Dating violence. What do you think dating violence? Ever have any kids who are dating and then there's some kind of physical altercation or something that happens in the dating? And so that is committed by a person who's been in a social relationship that's romantic or intimate with the victim. And when you're looking at that, you're going to, and that can happen, right? Maybe a student reports something, right? And this is where you have to ask questions. You're going to put on your detective hat. You're going to say, well, this person did this to me. Okay, well, tell me about that. How do you know this person? How long have you known? Are you in a relationship with them? Have you dated them before? Because sometimes I think when these things come in, we get called, but we're not told this when we ask, well, were they in a relationship? Well, I don't know. I didn't ask. That's kind of an important question. You want to know, like, what did the two people have any kind of relationship together, right? And maybe you know that because you're a principal and it's a small campus, and you know all of your students, but maybe you don't know. So you have to ask those questions. Were you guys in a relationship? Did you ever date? No, Okay. Domestic violence is a current or former spouse or intimate partner who have cohabitated or share a child. That's when you get into the domestic violence. And you could have those situations, right? I mean, you could have situations, and we had this at one particular school district. It was sort of a pattern for a little while, but there were several students who had babies with other students, and then there was some like fighting and violence, between them, and so that was something that we looked at, is whether that could be domestic violence under Title IX, that would trigger Title IX. And then stalking. Anybody know what stalking is? You've heard about it. It's a course of conduct, right? So somebody comes and they text, they call, they're always there at the car, and things like that. So it's a course of conduct. So when you're thinking about Title IX and a student comes and reports a set of facts to you, yes, you're going to listen, but you're also going to ask lots of questions to get at, does it trigger any of these definitions, okay? Everybody clear on that? Okay. So sexual harassment has many faces. This is, when we talk about sexual assault, it's forcible and non-forcible sex offenses under, as it's defined in the reporting system of the FBI. So it's all of the things that you see there. It can be rape, it can be sodomy. And I always say I'm shocked, but then I'm not shocked. When we had an incident or an allegation this past year that a student was sexually assaulted on the way to the cafeteria inside the school. And you guys think, how? Like, we asked that question too, but that's what the student reported. And not just that she was sexually assaulted, she was sodomized. It happens where students will report these things to you. And you're sitting there, I know, like me, like, really? Like, where are the teachers? How does that happen? And so we have to be listening. We have to, keep our ears open and keep an open mind as to what a student, might report. Can't say, well, how could that ever happen? This or that. They're always being monitored. There's no way. There's 100 people in there. Well, this kid said that it happened. Okay. So dating violence, we talked about that. It's a social relationship of a romantic or intimate nature with the victim. So when you're talking about, dating violence, ask those questions. Were you guys romantic? Were y'all, I don't know, my day we said going together. I don't know what they use now. Dating, what's the term that kids use now? Hanging out? What? Chilling? They're chilling together? You have to ask those questions, and you need to kind of know the lingo. You kind of have to know what to ask, because I know if it were me, I wouldn't know, I don't know the lingo that kids use these days to find out if they're in a romantic or intimate nature with each other. But you guys need to know that, so you got to be paying attention to all the emojis and things like that. And I'll tell you something else that has come up, and I know this sounds, I mean, I understand why, but if you have students who maybe, you know, kids are kids, and when they're young and you're 14, 15, and you don't really, like, you know, your body's changing and you have these, you know, feelings and urges, and you kind of have like a crush on someone, and, you know, maybe the guy is like, yeah, I kind of like her, and they're texting and they're hanging out, and then all of a sudden, you know, he's like, hey, let's meet after school, and let's hang out, or let's chill. And the girl says, yeah, and she's thinking, well, I like this guy, I have a crush on him, he wants to talk to me, he wants to be with me, but really he has something else on his mind. He thought, no, we're there, so kisses her, and she doesn't know how, because no one talked to her about, like, no means no. If you don't want to do something, say something. So she didn't say anything, she froze, and you know what happened? She was raped. And I know it's, I mean, you all need to, and I know you probably hear things like this on your campus, but it happens. And this young woman didn't have a mother at home, living with a grandmother, you know. Grandmother didn't speak any English. And I don't know if anyone was talking to her about, hey, you know, this is what happens, or what's going on, you know, what wants to meet you after school. Maybe they have something else on their mind. Maybe they don't just want to chill. Maybe they want to do something else. So you have to be, this is why I'm telling you, you have to ask questions. You have to, so he said, well, she didn't say anything. When I was kissing her, she didn't tell me no. And then, you know, she says, well, I didn't tell him that he could do that. Consent? Those are some hard issues, and we're going to talk about that, and that matters. It really, really does, and you have to be keeping an open mind about all of this. And this girl thought they were dating. And you know why? Because they were texting each other. She thought they were in a dating relationship. When the school talked to him, we weren't dating. Yeah, I texted her. So it matters, you know, you've got to ask the questions to find out. Did it trigger, you know, was it under this particular definition? Okay, stalking, talked about that. Course of conduct, someone, you know, fears for his or her safety, or, you know, suffering substantial distress. Okay, I want to talk to you about severe, pervasive, and objectively offensive. How am I doing on my time here? Oh, I got time. Okay, good. All right. That's really where a lot of this stuff comes in. Is it severe, is it pervasive, and is it objectively offensive? So the reason why I have that, and I don't know if you can see, but it's a sort of a constellation of stars, okay? And the reason I gave you that picture is because there's a court case that says whether conduct rises to the level of actionable harassment under Title IX depends on a constellation of surrounding circumstances. Okay, so we need to know what's the context, what was happening, the expectations. Remember, I thought we were dating. I didn't think we were dating. So we got to look at the expectations and the relationships of the parties, including but not limited to what's the age of the harasser. More than likely, if you've got, you know, a high school student who's 16, 17, and you've got, you know, an 8-year-old. And, you know, butt slapping and things like that, right? I mean, that may be a little bit different. You got to look at the age of the harasser, the age of the victim, the number of people involved. Maybe there's more than one person involved. And so that's what we're talking about. So that's why you've got to put on your detective hat. You've got to ask questions. I know you guys are super busy people, but I promise you, if you put a little bit of work in on the front end, it'll save you a lot of time on the back end, so that someone doesn't come back and say, well, I told them this, or they never did this, and it happens. I mean, you don't think it's going to happen right when it's like the worst time for anything bad to go down, like usually right around Christmas, end of the year, spring break, and you're getting ready for that big trip, you know, to Tahiti, and you got everything, you got the big cruise, whatever it is you've got planned, and something, boom, is going to go down. So that's why I want you to know on the front end, what are you going to do, what are the questions you're going to ask, so that you know how to handle the complaint. Okay. In Title IX, sexual harassment equals discrimination. So let's talk about a couple of these hypos. So high school teacher tells female student that she must share pictures of herself if she wants an A. this is sex discrimination. Why? Well, he probably wouldn't ask the male students, but maybe he would, right? But it could be. So if you, if you have this allegation, you're definitely going to want to, investigate and figure out what's going on. A male student often makes crude sexual remarks to a female student regarding her body. Okay, yes, I mean, crude sexual remarks, maybe it's about her breasts, her rear end. And so because of remarks that concern her female, characteristics, yes, that, is on sexual. Football students bully a drama student because drama is for girls. This is sex discrimination because a student is being bullied for for his perceived female characteristics or his perceived deviation from the stereotypical male, okay? So those are just some basic, that might trigger at least your radar to go up, okay? Like, I gotta ask more questions, okay, when something like that happens. Okay, so let's talk about this one, on the basis of sex. Alex is a 3rd grade male student. His favorite color is pink, and he sometimes paints his fingernails. Other students tease Alex because he often wears pink and paints his fingernails. Is this discrimination on the basis of sex? Why or why not? I mean, it could trigger it, right? I mean, that's something that you need to be aware of. You say, well, Lisa, you just got finished telling us, like, it has to be severe, pervasive, and objectively offensive. And you're right, I did tell you that, but what else did I tell you? Put on your detective hat. Ask questions. How often is this happening? Is there more than one student involved? You've got to, remember that constellation? You've got to get more information. So if someone comes to you and just tells you this story right here, don't just automatically assume this ain't nothing other than just kids being kids. We're gonna, we have a way of dealing with that. Go ahead and go the extra mile, ask a few more questions. Even if it's bullying, what are you supposed to do? If you think it's bullying, what do you as a principal do? What do you tell your AP to do? Give us a parent, right? You're supposed to contact a parent if a kid's being bullied. Ask mom. Mom, is there anything else going on at school that I need to know about with Alex? I mean, I'm hearing that he's being teased because of his pink nails. Well, yes, actually, he told me just the other night he got a series of texts on his phone, because all 3rd graders have phones now, and they were naked pictures of people, and they were putting his face on it and doing, okay, now I know, yeah, I think I might have to do something under Title IX. When things come into you, I promise you this, there's one thing I know without a doubt. No one's going to come to you with a set of facts and with a big sign that says, I'm a Title IX complaint. You need to handle me like a Title IX, with your Title IX process. That will not happen to you. It will not, I promise you that. It will not happen like that. You will get something like this. And then you're going to say, well, I know what this is. This is just regular old kids being kids. Ask a few more questions. Don't make assumptions. Okay, Betty comes to you and says that her math teacher is always looking at her funny and stares at other female students when they walk away from his desk. This makes Betty uncomfortable. Is Betty experiencing sexual harassment under Title IX? What do? Somebody raise their hand. Ask questions. Yes, who said that? We'll give you, I'll put some right there. Yes, you ask questions. What's happening? Maybe you need to talk to more kids in the class. Maybe you need to find out, what else is happening. I'll just keep them up here. Yeah. Who answered that? Did anybody want something? Okay. All right. So you would want to ask more questions. What would you do? Okay. Betty tells you this. It comes to you. Then what do? Hey, you can ask questions. Are there any other kids that are experiencing this? Maybe you call the teacher in. What are they going to say? No, I never stare at their butts. I'm serious. That actually came into us. And all the girls said when they would line up to walk to pledge allegiance, he would stand behind them and checking them all out. It happened. So, we have to ask more questions. And it was actually a series of girls that were, saying this. Deliberately indifferent standard, that was also in that initial definition that I gave you back a few slides ago. So when a school is sued under Title IX for harassment, to prevail, the plaintiff has to show that the school was deliberately indifferent in response to a report of harassment, and that it was unreasonable in light of the known circumstances. Remember, we talked about the constellation of circumstances there. Everything that was known to you, what did you do? Was it unreasonable? And that's why, like, if you see something, just do something, follow up, ask those extra questions. So that's going to be the standard that the plaintiff would have to prove, is that you were deliberately indifferent, okay, that you didn't do anything. So always do something. Now, a lot of times what happens is that, well, we didn't investigate it under Title IX, we just investigated it under our regular student code of conduct. You did do something, but you are going to be, there are going to be issues, because under the Title IX, remember I told you how rigid it is and how formal it is? There's specific things that you have to do and provide and give information. There's lots of notices. I gave you some sample notices in your packets. There's a lot of things that you have to do, and so you want to make sure that you're doing all of that. So that's why this is important. Okay, so next scenario. Student makes accusations of sexual harassment against her former softball coach. The school investigates, and they say, well, yeah, he tapped some kids on the butts. He, did some things that were inappropriate. But in the end, after they, investigate, they allowed him to return to work. Okay, so they did investigate. After the investigation, guess what happens? The student gets bullied by her teammates because he was a well-liked coach. And the school disciplines the students who were bullying her. So she winds up having to, I think eventually she winds up changing schools. And she continues to be bullied. She has to go to a different school. And so she does that, and then her parents wind up suing the district. Was the school's conduct clearly unreasonable? Why or why not? What do you think? You think the school was clearly unreasonable? Well, the court didn't think so. The court said nope. They investigated. Now, here's where, the issue that here, the court said that what they did in response to the coach tapping them on the butt, that they did what they were supposed to. Okay, they investigated, and it wasn't clearly unreasonable. The issue here was the student, was being bullied. She was being retaliated against. Okay, and the district did respond. But what the court did said that there was enough facts to allow that claim of retaliation, okay, to move forward. And what you have to remember is, just like under your Title VIIs and all of your other civil rights discrimination, remember there's always something, if you read the policies, you can retaliate against someone for filing a claim. Someone files a claim, someone files a grievance or something like that. The district and its employees, so all of you, you can't retaliate against, you can't hold it against them, you can't ice them out, you can't exclude them from meetings, you can't treat them differently because they filed a complaint, because that's their right. So in this case, that's what happened, is the student believed that she was retaliated against, and the court allowed that claim of retaliation to move forward. But the court said no, the school wasn't deliberately indifferent when it investigated the coach, and that was a butt slap, on the butt. And it wasn't just one student, it was multiple students, okay? So I know it gets complicated, but you really have to kind of, think through, these one by one. Okay, so let's talk about another one. Several girls filed grievances alleging that the girls' team is unequally funded and is providing poor uniforms and equipment. Their coach joins the protest. Soon afterwards, the coach receives a negative work evaluation and is ultimately removed from his position as coach. Should the coach be protected from retaliation? Yes, he's also protected. He's also protected because he joined their protest. So yes, reporting incidents of discrimination is integral to enforcing Title IX, and it would be discouraged if we would allow people to be retaliated against, who report the misconduct, and those people aren't punished for that. So, yes, the coach is protected. Okay, so what else should we talk about, like when it comes to severe, pervasive, and objectively offensive? This is language from court opinions. Mere inconveniences, annoyances are insufficient under the Title IX definition of sexual harassment. I know we talked about severe, pervasive, and objectively offensive. So that means not everything, not every kind of sex. Like, he touched my boob. He sexually harassed me. Well, how many times? Was it by accident? Was it on purpose? Was it more than one person? So we have to get to all the facts. So, people bump into people's private sometimes, and it's an accident. It happens. So the court recognizes that. So you all need to recognize that too. Now, I'm not telling you, I'm kind of scared here. You're saying that, there's damages and this, that, and the other. Yes. But I'm telling you, be smart, ask the right questions, and document what you do. Document what you do. Write it down. You guys take notes. You're good at taking notes. I've seen your notes from different reports and things, seen what you write, on evaluations, your memos and things like that. You guys know how to take notes. Take notes. Student came to me on X date. Student reported this. I followed up with mom. Mom said this. Based on what they told me, we investigated this under student code of conduct. The student was disciplined pursuant to this. Maybe you make the phone call to the Title IX coordinator and you say, this is how I handled it. And if you think that, this is something that you want the Title IX coordinator to be aware of. Okay, so those isolated acts of harassment are unlikely to be, sufficient to rise to Title IX misconduct. Remember, it has to be severe. So physical contact is more likely to be severe without the need for repetition. One instance of, rape, that's going to be enough to trigger it. You don't have to have all the rest of it, right? So a non-consensual sexual encounter is going to, be severe. Maybe they consented, so that, but still, you would still investigate that, right? If she says, no, I didn't consent, that's it. You got it. It triggers Title IX. Pervasive. When we talk about pervasive, how widespread is it? How intense is it? What's the duration? How frequently is this happening? And let me tell you about how, pervasive and what's happening now, what I'm seeing at one particular district. I got a phone call about a kid taking a picture of another kid inside the locker room in his underwear. Okay, well, yeah, that happens. Okay, so the district was looking at that. Then, about a week later, I got another phone call about a kid with the phone in the locker room with a video. I'm like, well, wait a minute, didn't you call me last week? Was that the same one? Oh, no, this is a different one. Okay, so now you have it. Yeah, it's a different one. Okay. I kid you not, 3 days later, it was another one. There was another one. It was like 4 or 5 of these. What? At the same school district? What does that tell you? You got a problem. You got a problem with kids taking phones in the locker room and taking pictures of each other and putting it on social media. You got to do something about that. You have to do something about it. You need to have a policy. You need to sit down with these kids. You need to tell them they can't have phones. And if you have a phone in the locker room, you're off the team. Okay, so sometimes that's why you have to ask questions. And you know what? I was talking to the Title IX coordinator. Title IX coordinator didn't see it that way. Why? Because it was happening in several different schools. Well, it happened at this middle school, then it happened at the high school, then it happened at the girls. So it was a sprinkling, but unless you're letting your Title IX coordinator know what's happening, how do you know if it's widespread? How do you know if it's pervasive? You're not going to know. You've got to ask the questions. And I'm telling you, you guys, I know how important your students are to you, and I know the work that you do, how important it is to you, and you have so many things to do, but this is one of those areas where take a little bit more time. Take a breath, follow up. Reach out to your Title IX coordinator, because they may be hearing about stuff that you're not knowing about. So report it. Doesn't hurt. There's a kid in the locker room, he has a picture, and he took a picture of their knees, you know, or something like that. You know, like, well, it's their knees, you know, or maybe at the bottom half of the underwear. Okay, you know, you weren't supposed to do that. But if you call your Title IX coordinator and you say, hey, this happened, she's going, well, wait a minute. I had 2 other calls. We got to do something about that. So you really do need to ask the questions, okay? And that's how you're going to know if it's pervasive, like you've got a problem within your district that you have to do something about. And we actually had a similar incident with another school district. It was the same thing, stuff going on inside the locker room. And it was a pattern of kids like hitting each other in their privates. And once they found out because one parent reported it, and the kid the offender, the perpetrator, when he got punished, the mother said, well, wait a minute, last week that kid hit my kid in the privates. What did you do about that? And then when they started looking at it, oh, a bunch of kids were getting hit in the privates. They had a problem. They needed to deal with it. Okay, so objectively offensive, it's a reasonable person standard. You know, we're going to think about things like intimidation, like the age and the relationship of the complainant. You've got a high school kid with like an 8-year-old, maybe it's a camp that they have, a little football camp or something like that. You know, you're going to look at that, and that can be, you know, where it's objectively offensive when you're talking about, you know, somebody exposing themselves to an 8-year-old. That's more offensive than maybe if it was in the locker room and it's like, well, yeah, he turned around real fast and I saw his privates. Okay, well, you know, that's not going to be looked at the same way, right? And so we're going to look at the number of persons involved and whether there was ridicule involved as well. Okay, so let's talk about another example. Is this making more sense as we go along? Anybody kind of thinking, ooh, you know? But you guys see it probably more, you know, because y'all are in this. Okay, student alleges that she is often teased and given stares and the cold shoulder from other students. Why or why not is the conduct experienced by the student severe, pervasive, and objectively offensive? Who wants, let's see what I got in here. Who wants like some little stickies? Who wants to answer this question for me? Nobody? So, okay, the hypo is student alleges that she is often teased, given stares, and the cold shoulder from other students. Why or why not is the conduct experienced by the student severe, pervasive, and objectively offensive? What? What do you think?
Well, it's subjective.
It's subjective?
She feels like
Okay.
she alleges.
She alleges, all right. So she's teased, she's stared at. Again, we would want to know more, right? We don't really know. But remember, I also told you that, I mean, let's face it, we were all in school too. Sometimes it's a hard place to be. Kids tease each other. Not everything that happens on the school ground is going to be, you know, on the playground is going to be something that rises to the level of Title IX, right? So we would want to ask more questions. Okay, she's teased. Why are you being teased? What do they say? What are the words that are being used? You're staring at, who's staring at you? Multiple students? One student? Why are they staring at you? The cold shoulder, what's happening? Well, they're ostracizing me. They're not letting me participate in this. Okay, all right, well, why do you think that is? I mean, it's possible it can, but remember, there are other kinds of misconduct under your student code of conduct, bullying, right? And maybe it falls under that. So this is one where, you know, of course you're going to ask like a lot more questions. What's going on? And if you think it's bullying, and that's sort of what your gut tells you, well then, and you call mom or dad may have, or grandma may have something else, you know, to say about this. Okay, high school student Johnny alleges that he was called names gay, weirdo, queer in the locker room following soccer practice because he was wearing pink underwear. Johnny reports that he was teased at school to his parent and says, it was no big deal, Mom. Student's parents want to file a complaint. Student does not want to file a complaint, reporting that he thought it was funny. Does the conduct meet the definition under Title IX? Who wants, let's see what else I've got in here. I have a notepad. Anybody want to take a stab at it? There's no wrong answer. Remember, we're learning here. We're all learning. We're thinking about this together. You got the collective mind. You got the beehive mind here. So we're walking through this together. This is how these things come in.
I'm going to guess as a student's a minor, the parent has limited complaint.
Yeah, the parents can file a complaint. If they want to file a complaint, you should never discourage a parent from filing a complaint. In fact, if this comes in, I mean, you're gonna wanna make sure that you say, well, okay, you wanna file a complaint. So let's talk about, there's different ways that parents can file a complaint, right? You have different grievance procedures, it's so in this case, if you're the principal and mom says, I wanna file a complaint, okay, let's talk about this. Let me explain to you, we have a couple of different ways. We have our student code of conduct, and you can file a complaint this way. Or, you know, we have Title IX, we have a Title IX coordinator. Here's her name, here's her business card. You can file a formal complaint, here's a copy of it. You can fill it out, and the district will look at it. It's a formal process, and there'll be a written report, and there'll be an investigation with evidence collected. You'll be able to see all of the evidence that's collected. And they'll make a determination whether it rises to the level of violation of sexual harassment. Okay. In this case, let's say that happens and, you know, the student doesn't even want to participate. He's like, you know, Mom, everybody. It was, you know, pink month, it was breast cancer awareness. They were laughing at me because I had on pink underwear. Mom, like, it's really no big deal. See, that's going to undermine objectively offensive. Remember I told you you have to meet severe, pervasive, and objectively offensive? And so if you're a decision maker, and this is all you got, and the student is even, you know, Mom is pushing hard, got the complaint, and the district says, no, okay, here we go. We're gonna, you know, let's rock and roll. We got the report. Now you're the decision maker. You're gonna make that decision. Are you gonna say that's the student didn't want to talk to you, and it's their right. They don't have to participate in the process. Doesn't want to file a complaint. Is it objectively offensive? It kind of undermines that third prong, right? You know, we don't like kids, to feel teased. We want everybody to feel safe and respected. So maybe there's something else you can do. Maybe, you know what, it's not going to meet the violation, so, you know, there's nothing to be done there. But maybe there's other things that you can do, right? So I always tell people, if Mom wants to file a complaint, let them. Okay, there's other ways that we can deal with it. I mean, it may be that it may be dismissed outright, because even if everything that you say is true, all of that's true, it still doesn't meet the definition, right? But sometimes we get all wrapped up and like, well, Mom wants this, and I don't want to get in trouble, and, you know, but to me, I would say, you know what, I don't think it meets objectively offensive, and the reason is the student complainant doesn't even want to deal with that. So this might be one where I'd say, you know what, you're probably safe just checking all the boxes, you did all the other procedures, you can dismiss it, even if everything they say is true, dismiss it, document it, and then maybe you have supportive measures where you've got more monitoring in that locker room so kids aren't teased, okay? Because I'm telling you, you can swing the other way on this stuff. This kind of stuff comes in probably all the time to you guys. And I've got one district, and that's what's happening. And everything that comes in, if it even remotely resembles sex, they're dealing with it under Title IX, and that will absolutely create a backlog and so much work for you guys. So, you know, you need to just to think through all of these elements, okay? Hang on tight. I know I can see some of you falling asleep, so just a few more minutes.
I just wanted to make one point.
Yeah.
Talking about, because all of this, like Lisa was saying, is based on things that we deal with. You know, again, about the sodomy case, I never thought that anything like that could happen on a campus, and that's the allegation we got this year, that a young woman was sodomized during the school day, I think, or right after school. So these are real world examples. But I was going to say on that one that Lisa just finished is, you know, you can always tell the parent, remind them, as Lisa said, there's different avenues. Just because it may not go down that Title IX route, there's always the F&G process, right? And make them aware, you know, ma'am, sir, you're not happy with the way we handle this about your child being teased over wearing underwear. File the F&G complaint.
What's F&G?
The F&G complaint is, the F&G policy is the parent grievance policy, okay? So that is in your board policy. That is the avenue where a parent can basically complain about just about anything. You know, from what time school starts to, I don't like my teacher, I think the principal's not doing a good job. It's the avenue that the Texas Education Administration has made available to give this avenue to the parents to complain. And many times what we'll find is that, and I think it's important to document also that you let parents know about the F&G, because if there's a language barrier or a parent doesn't know how to articulate very well, you'll get something on that F&G complaint point that will tell you more than you thought you knew or did know. And that, what might be contained in that F&G complaint, you may say, okay, now I understand what the parent is saying. Maybe I do need to contact the Title IX coordinator and revisit this to see if we also need to analyze it, not only bullying policy or student code of conduct, but Title IX.
Exactly. So let's go, I'm going to skip, this is, I want to talk about this one because this is another one that happened at a school district. Of course, a little bit different, but so you have a high school world history teacher. They assign homeworks, and that homework requires requires students to watch videos on YouTube that depict sex acts, including same-sex act, nudities, marital infidelity, and drug use. The parent finds out and reports it to you, the high school principal. Where are my high school principals here? Okay, reports it to you. You review the homework assignment, you look at it, and you determine that the assignment does not meet any learning objectives for the world history class. What do you do? What do you think? What do you guys think? Could it meet severe, pervasive, and objectively offensive?
Yes.
Yeah, right? You got a captive audience there. You're assigning these kids homework. You're making them watch these things. The one we had, it wasn't quite this bad, but he did make them watch videos that were, inappropriate at the very least, and these were younger children. So, yeah, it can be. So, what do you do?
The lesson plans were already been
Approved?
approved before then. Now, if that happened after, like, they submitted a lesson plan and that wasn't on the lesson plan, then we saw it, and then we received the complaint. And for that first step is to get the teacher in, have a conversation about what prompted them to even try to even provide this lesson to kids. And we just go this step from there, and then I will contact HR, get some supporting guidance from there, and we move forward.
Right. Okay. So you would contact HR, and again, I think it also means severe, pervasive, and objectively offensive. To me, that would trigger. I mean, you're going to deal with the employee, right, not doing what they were supposed to do, and that's one thing. And that process is going to move forward. But you're also going to be dealing with, it's going to trigger notifications to parents about what was happening with this too. And we're going to talk about that more in a little bit. So,
Something else, I hate to try to mention, but I think what he was saying, and I was going to ask you to repeat it so you repeat here, was that the teacher did that to also cover your HR basis. Like he was saying, it wasn't in the lesson plan, and I'm going to write you a disciplinary letter. It doesn't have to be a reprimand, maybe just a memo. You are not to show videos that I, the principal, haven't approved, or my assistant principal, or it's not part of the lesson plan. All those things help, because later on, if we find out that this guy is truly a weirdo, a pedophile, who knows, and he keeps doing it on the secret, if we can't ever prove that, you were insubordinate, you did not follow a directive, we're terminating your contract. So it's also good to document on the HR that things like this happen.
yeah. That's a very good point. You have to document, and you've got to write the letters. And I see so many memos, and I know it's uncomfortable to, because these are people that you might have lunch with, maybe you know them socially. But you've got to be strong in your letters. You are directed to, show me every lesson plan. You cannot deviate from the lesson plan. If you are going to show a video, I want prior approval, whatever it is, give them a directive. And when they don't follow it, you've got them for insubordination. Okay, you can do something else. So I'll leave you with that. Why don't you guys, let me see, Nico avoids contact. I guess let's do one more. I'm sorry. Beatrice and Nico are in a high school trim class together. Beatrice uses Snapchat to ask Nico to have sex with her. Nico refuses. Beatrice says that she will rape him if he does not have sex with her. Nico takes screenshots of the snaps sent by Beatrice, and then Nico avoids contact with Beatrice. He quits attending trig class, and ultimately, due to the numerous absences, the school contacts Nico's parents, and Nico subsequently informs the school and his parents about what happened. What do you do? Is this severe, pervasive, and objectively offensive?
I think it is, because he's missing class.
He's missing class, but also, what are we going to want to know? How true is the threat? Is this a true threat? What if Nico is 300 pounds and Beatrice is 100? Could she rape him? Maybe, yeah, maybe she could. but these are questions that you're going to want to ask, okay? Because ultimately, everything that you do, you're going to have to justify the action that you took or you didn't take, okay? So, you know, whether this is a true threat, it's going to be something, it's going to go to her capacity. Is she able to carry out this threat? And remember, even if it's not Title IX, is it a violation of your student code of conduct? Yeah, so you still have things that you can do, even if it doesn't rise to the level of Title IX harassment. Remember, that's separate. That's a separate grievance process. You still have your other process for dealing with